Hello, Snap Mulligan. This again. We don't get a scry. We are on the draw. We have a Bloodghast. I guess this hand is really good if we just get land. So I guess let's risk it. Totally worked out earlier, right? One thing that's nice about Magic Online is how it de-sideboards for you. Yes! It's very tempting to play Rotting Rats here, actually. And try and get the Bloodghast back next turn. We have to get this. I think that's a good idea. That's a little bit of card advantage. And this person probably isn't in reanimation, as it were. We could also discard the Cloudguard Ranger and just try and Shallow Grave it back, but I think that's bad. Whoa! Hey, Rotting Rats. You just dodged me an enormous bullet. This card is horrific. 3 colors. Okay, well, we're winning on cards. Despite having mulliganed. Does that tap for any color? Yep. Or do you reckon we see a blue spell here? Fine, whatever. Come on, land! Come on, land! Just one land. One more land. Come on, come on, come on. Oh, it's like the worst possible thing. Oh, that's so sad. They're probably going to play something else next turn, which will probably be a Planeswalker that'll make a token, and ship it. This at least jump blocks. Jump blocks and Unearth, so we can discard Griselbrand and Shallow Grave it back to catch up on life a little bit and cards, but we'll probably be too far behind on tempo by then, to be honest. Thrun. Okay, I'm fine with Liliana killing Thrun as well. Do we even chump here? Maybe we chump next turn? If we're planning on playing Lily, what happens if we don't chump? Then the opponent probably just monstresses Poly-K. I think we have to block and just use Liliana as a... Maybe I'm just not winning if I do that. It's difficult. Well, this plane cycles. That's good. Which gets the Bloodghast back. But then we probably just die. I don't really see us winning this game, but we knew that. We have way more cards in hand. That helps, right? Here comes whatever Planeswalker, I'm guessing. Oh no! The opponent is just eating the Bloodghast. Sure, you do that. Is there any way we can not die next turn? Oh, we can condemn Polukranos now! Didn't even notice that was in our hand. That's brilliant. And then we can Liliana Thrun away. We might not lose this game. Be gone! Out! And when the opponent is on 27 with a deck full of meat, that they're just going to top deck endlessly. But let it be known that we got there. Begone, Thrun. Yeah. Get out. Okay. Then we can plus Lily, discard Griselbrand, Shallow Grave, draw 7. Boy. Okay. Okay, that's a thing. Maybe we just hymn to Turok them and take away whatever their creatures are, but we can actually do both if we get... We'll get a swamp off Griselbrand, right? Let's see what else we draw. I think Griselbranding first is a good idea. Doop. Fauna Shaman. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Oh, it's at the top. You don't get to target. Wow, I forgot about that. I'm glad this works anyway. We might even actually draw... We can draw Carrion Feeder and sacrifice Griselbrand, so as to not lose it. But I'm very tempted to hymn away whatever is in our opponent's hand right now. We've got Animate Dead. We don't have really anything else to do. Land Tag's pretty good. Ooh, hello Bloodgust. Nice to see you. Do we draw another 7 cards? I think that's far too ballsy. Our opponent could well be playing Kratos Claws or Fireball or something. This is probably enough to get us back into the game. I think I'm going to hymn first. Liliana can suppress top decks after that. Oh, that was worth it! Worth it and a half. Okay. Right. Griselbrand dies. Well, he's exiled. You know what? 2 mana, draw 7 cards, your opponent takes 7 damage. I'll take it. I will take it. Now, do we discard lands or do we discard other things that we can animate dead back? No, let's discard lands. We can animate dead for better value on Dragon, or indeed the opponent's Wormcoil Engine. Ooh. Spicy. Teehee. Wow. We went from, oh no, I am 100% doomed, to, oh boy, we are so winning. That is remarkable. I'm impressed at how well that worked out. Okay. Do we bother plussing Liliana? We can lose land tax. Actually, can we? Maybe we actually want to play it. Dissuades the opponent from drawing lands. I guess that doesn't matter. From playing lands even. But that doesn't matter. Probably overthinking this. Let's attack. Reanimate Wormcoil Engine. See if they scoop. Sup. And cast this, because it's good. And just leave Lily as she is. Oh, that was a turnaround. Okay. Right, we'll need board wipes. Winter Orb. That's almost tempting, because you can envisage a draw where we just play like some small creatures and then... No, because the opponent can just untap their stuff and wait. Whereas our deck has multiple parts. Lots of parts. Is Buried Alive too slow here? No, because it leads to almost broken draws. That said, they are slowly broken draws. Him is good, removal is good, land tax is good, especially as we're on the draw. Ranger is meh. The opponent will probably have mass. No, hang on. We want the attrition engine, which will be excellent here. Servitude is good, Angel is good because Planeswalkers. Grey Merchant is always good because it's Grey Merchant of Asphodel. They probably have Mana Dorks for this to kill, but we are on the draw, so we could take that out. That might actually be sensible. Although, no, because it's minus counters, not... Ooh, it's very difficult. This is really good against Planeswalkers. Let's cut the Ranger. If we get attrition, it's good enough against them anyway, because they'll have few large relevant threats compared to our smaller creatures. Alright, we have land this time, we have Animate Dead, we have Bloodghast, it's a keep. Oof. Spicy. Hey look! Lands! Aren't lands great? We can play spells. That is bold. I think our opponent was going to scry the face. Was going to jet the face if we didn't play the ghast there. Because I don't see any other reason why you Magma Jet a Bloodghast. Unless they misplayed, I guess. Yeah, okay, they did really need a land. I do feel kind of bad for this. Liliana into straight gas. What are we discarding here? Grey Merchant? Skinrender? Skinrender kills any Mana Dorks they might draw, but they might not draw any. Grey Merchant is better on reanimation, but these all are. I'm gonna play this. I'm gonna discard the Skinrender because I don't have a target right now. We got Garruk again. I'm so glad I'm not having to fight that, I have to say. Oh, still no land. I feel kind of bad. Although, we won from this position last time, so... what do I know? I think I'm going to discard this swamp? Do I discard? I think... No, I think... At this point, our opponent's still going to be able to discard... No, that's it, because if our opponent discards anything massive, we can Animate Dead it. And if they don't do that, they'll be discarding Planeswalkers and other engine cards. I think we still want the land, so I'll discard the Condemn, which might be stupid. Oh, shuffles. Next leveled. Next leveled. Oh well, let's attack. We're going to be able to ultimate Liliana at this rate. I mean, we're not necessarily going to, but... A 2-1? How could you, opponent? How could you? We can discard that for sure. Let's see if they block here. The opponent is more sensible than that. Take a bunch of damage. Let's see what they get rid of. Oh no! Oh, opponent, that's so awful. I'm not sure I can bring myself to do that. They played Rofelos, I can bring myself to do that. I feel like such a bad person doing this. I mean, I guess I'm doing it, but I can minus here and kill the Einok. Is that worth doing? Yeah, probably. It's one less thing on the board. Yeah, let's just do it. Let's beat that guy. I guess if this gets killed, it comes back under my opponent's control, which is kind of bad, actually. That said, what are they going to do about it? Now, do we take away their mana, or do we take away their red mana? We didn't see what they... Okay, fair enough. Oh, I feel bad for that. Hey, it got us a victory, I guess. Oh, I feel kind of awful doing that. That's really mean. There's a lot of plays like that in the higher power cubes. I mean, I've complained about Khan before, and you heard me complain about him in round 1 again. Just there's kind of a lot of feel bad plays. But that was quite an interesting experience because it was very similar to the Holiday Cube, but less silly. It was kind of like a serious version of the same thing. I found that there were still a lot of Planeswalkers, a lot of expensive permanents. We played 2 ramp decks that didn't do anything in the early turns, and blue-black control deck that only did, fairly dirtly things in the early turns, or like good value things. We played against very few removal spells. I think we saw... Let's see, we saw Dragonlord Silumgar, the Primus, Ulamog, technically, Karn and Garruk. So we saw some, 8 mana bombs that happened to do removal. But I think the only removal spells, actual normal removal spells I saw in the entire draft were my own. We saw a couple go past. I saw a Chain Lightning. There was the Vindicate that I regretfully passed. There was a Disfigure. A couple of... We saw a Wrath of God, Supreme Verdict. Some stuff like Sword of Temptation. Day of Judgment. So we saw some mass removal, value removal. Very little actual spot removal, which is really odd. Given that... Oh, we saw an Abrupt Decay, actually, didn't we? But given that in Legacy, you see a lot of that stuff, right? You see very few 4-mana sorcery speed board wipes. But I found that you still had the same kind of... Maybe because of this, and because of maybe the lack of cheap aggressive creatures, you still have this kind of ponderous gameplay. I guess when the cube is singleton and you're just playing cards based entirely on power, or almost entirely on power, those cards are going to be expensive. A lot of especially newer powerful cards that tend to be 4 and 5 mana, because they were printed for standard. And you get the odd power card like Deathrite Shaman or Delver of Secrets that was aimed at the Eternal formats. But even they... there's only one of each, right? We did see them go past in the cube, but who can really play Delver in Limited? Same with Young Pyromancer, it's just one card, whereas it's quite easy, I think, to just pick up a stream of crazy 5-drops and the lands to cast them. Excuse me. Yeah, that was very interesting. I'm not sure how much I would say it was fun, pure fun. I mean, I enjoyed myself. I got to do some pretty crazy stuff. I mean, the turn, any time when I reanimated Griselbrand, silly things were happening, especially the Shallow Grave one. That was great. I cannot believe I won that game. But I think with this kind of cube, this precise cube, is at a funny crossroads between the silly fun that you get in high power cubes. Actual power cubes. This is high power, but like power cubes, like the Holiday Cube, which is just all silly all the time, and the synergy-driven, very intense, highly efficient play of Eternal formats, which are a far cry from what you actually see here, because I mean it's pretty hard to replicate that stuff in Limited. But my own cube plays a lot more like Modern than this cube does, in my personal opinion. Because the mana curves are much lower, and there are fewer, here's my Elspeth kind of cards. There are actually very few cards that take over the game by themselves, which is also the case in Modern. There are a few kind of trump sideboard cards, your Rest in Pieces and stuff, and there are obviously some very good creatures, Tarmogoyf, Siege Rhino, but there are limited presence in the format, and there are specific decks that play those cards, just like in my cube there are specific decks that play Broodmate Dragon or whatever, where you resolve one of your 5 bombs and you win the game with it. But the rest of the decks, there's much more reliance on curving out and efficiently using your mana, answering threats. All the removal is quite cheap. There are very few creatures that you just play and win. In fact, when I find those creatures, I tend to trim them where I can. Like I need to cut Shaman of the not Shaman of the Forgotten Ways, Shaman of the Hunt. No, what's it called? The 4/2 for 3 and a red with haste from Dragon's Maze, where you can pay to draw cards, and if it hits the opponent, all your creatures get +1/+1 counters. Shaman of the Great Hunt, or something like that. That card is, I think, too powerful. I think it's you play it and it's hard to win against it, because the impact of, if you don't immediately remove it right there and then at instant speed, if you don't have a counterspell or something, you end up being really far behind. And despite the low mana curves, it's a lot harder to find cheap blockers than it is to find cheap attackers, just because the attacker can use removal more effectively, and there are plenty of cards that they block, but they're only 1 power because they have some other ability, or you don't actually want to throw them away, but maybe you have to. I mean, if you get a Fauna Shaman or a Courser of Krufix out there to block it, that's great, but if you get if all you've got is Sakura Tribe Elders and Overgrown Battlements, then you're a bit sad. And a card like this is very capable of exploiting any small unevenness in the board state. Planeswalkers are the same. I don't have very many Planeswalkers in my cube for this very reason. I think they're far too... swingy is the wrong word. They can swing a game, they're supposed to, but it's more than that. You take any even board in a limited format, and cube is a limited format, and you put a Planeswalker on one side, and that format just... that board state just massively slants. Even the lower powered Planeswalkers, like, say, the original Kiora, her +1 is so oppressive on a board state like that. It just makes her very difficult to get rid of. So she very reliably ultimates if you have even, a sort of token blockers. Not literally tokens, but tokens will also do. If you have the flimsiest of defenses, that's enough. Kiora defends herself really well. And obviously these cards don't necessarily break through in competitive formats as heavily because of Hero's Downfall and counter spells, and obviously that's why they generate card advantage so easily and threaten ultimate so easily, is because if you can get them past the Hero's Downfalls and the Ruinous Paths and what have you of the format, then you deserve that. But in Limited, that's actually really easy for a lot of Planeswalkers. And I don't like their ability to swing an even board. And this cube is full of those cards. And obviously when the environment is comprised almost entirely of those cards and the means to cast them, they kind of balance themselves out, but it leads to some extremely swingy gameplay with a lot of feel-bad moments. And a lot of feel-good moments. I'm not actually, not criticizing it too harshly here. I have written about feel-bad moments in games before. My dislike of playing against Khan Liberated is the same as everybody else's. But for me, that extends to a dislike of the design of the card. Well, not so much the design. The Khan's design in abstract is actually quite nice. His thematics are really good, but the existence of Khan sort of bothers me. Even in Modern, where it's much fairer, there is still a deck that is just like do nothing, play Khan, win. And I think when you have a format that is comprised of those cards, you don't get the sort of efficient to and fro that you get in Modern and I think Legacy. I've played very little Legacy, but from what I've played and seen of it, it looks kind of similar to Modern with better cards and some more complex decks. But even in Legacy, right, your Timmy spells cost 3 mana. You 3 mana for Emrakul by way of Show and Tell, or 1 mana instant speed by way of Sneak Attack. Whereas in this, you just hardcast them and kind of run them into each other. It is interesting. I wonder if I got a sort of slanted section of the cube. I assume it is bigger than the 360 cards. They often are. I think the Holiday Cube is 660, and I assume this is about the same size. So I didn't play against very much red. I mean, I played against red mana, but we didn't see any air quotes red decks. We saw 5 color green, 3 color green, and blue black. And I'm sort of lumping those maybe almost crassly into green, just because they have the green playstyle of like play dorks or just wait, play enormous things. I consider that to be quintessentially green. So no matter how many colors they're playing, to me, in my heart, they're green. And they give you the same kick as playing mono green, even if you're playing 5 colors. Especially if you're playing 5 colors, it's even funnier then. But I wonder what the aggro decks look like. I wonder if anybody ever just actually takes all those Hodling Outbursts and Glorious Anthems we saw, or puts Lotleth Troll and Wild Mongrel and Animate Dead together. I hope they do, but the lure of good stuff is very strong in any format. Different formats emphasize the synergy more than others. In this cube, it looks like the synergy is just kind of overshadowed by all the power. So you could take Lotleth Troll and be on your way to playing some kind of graveyard deck. Or I could take this Jace, So you take the Jace, right? Because it's a Jace. And in Power Cube, the Holiday Cube, this is less of a problem because the archetypes are a bit less strong. It's just like, let's literally throw the 660 best cards in Magic in a box and let players have fun with them. So you go ahead and take the Jace. You're not putting yourself into or out of. I think the only real archetype in there is Mono Red. I might be wrong. I mean, you can build reanimated decks and stuff, but that's because there are reanimated cards. Rather than, I think, because there's a fully crafted color pair specific reanimator archetype. Whereas in this, I mean, we saw enough cards to suggest to me that maybe there is, say, a green-black reanimator. But I ended up playing white-black reanimator just because I had good cards in white and black come my way. That's what the signal said. And I can certainly play these reanimator cards for value. I can use Lily to make people discard because Lily is good, and then I can use Animate Dead to make my opponents concede. I really feel sorry for my third opponent. Instead of, or having to play Mulch. I mean, whereas if you took a Lotleth Troll in, say, Return to Ravnica draft, the retail draft, okay, so you've got a Lotless Troll, it's good, you know that. But then, suppose you say, I want to play green-black. You look at your next pack, and there's a card there with Scavenge, and you're like, oh man, that goes with my Lotless Troll. I'll take that. Right? And so even if because green-black is that archetype, and Lotleth Troll is a strong, very strong card, it will indicate you in the direction of that color pair, and therefore in the direction of that archetype. Whereas in a cube that is full of very powerful cards and mana fixing, the cards that are very strong, I think the mana fixing contributes to this, by the way. If you took away a lot of the mana fixing, you probably would get people lining up more into the color pairs and therefore probably being shoehorned into the archetypes a bit more. But if you see let's say they assemble the Legion that our opponent played against me in round 1, I mean, that doesn't mean you have to play red-white, because you have all these lands, right? Why bother? And so there's no massive pressure to actually play the colours that your signal cards put you in. And so if you end up with a critical mass of them, like I did with the reanimation cards, that's fair enough. I ended up doing that because black was open rather than because I wanted to play Reanimator. And I was in the wrong colours for the air quotes Reanimator archetype. That's not a bad thing, by the way. I mean, that happens all the time in even cubes like mine, which is really sort of set along archetypes. But there's definitely a big difference between the cubes where you can play your good cards and cubes where, or indeed retail sets, where you can't. And there's kind of a sliding scale between them. So in something like Magic Origins, you had to be really stingy with your splashes. And it looks like Battle for Zendikar is going to be the same, but slower, so you have enough time maybe to draw up your... And you know, there's more ramp and stuff, so there's certain decks will be able to play more colours than others. In Khans, you could force lands and play whatever you want. Just like in Power Cube, so you could build these 5-color good stuff decks. But the cards weren't so strong that you were necessarily playing that many colours by default. There was still a lot of lands around, so you could kind of do it, but you had to take the lands very aggressively because everybody wanted them, which I think some people do in these cubes. You know, people scoop up loads of land because it means they'll be able to play whatever they open, which in this case is all these planeswalkers and stuff. And I mean, maybe I'm being misled. Maybe that's just a common strategy and we've just run into it here. Certainly, I think the intended effect is going to be a mix of both. I think they want you to be able to play good stuff because it's cube. Everyone loves 5-color good stuff, especially in cube, right? And they want you to play archetypes that do things, you know, where your deck has a plan, like a legacy deck would, and to bring you some of that high power, high synergy experience. But that's really hard to do in cube without massively focusing on it, I find. Even in my cube, again, my cube's very synergy focused, very little good stuff. There's still plenty of room in there for people to invent things and mess around and get it wrong and all that stuff, and I think that's great. I actually like that. I'm fully in favour of that. But it's just interesting that you can never really railroad Magic in itself. You can never really railroad your players because they'll just interpret your cards differently. One of the reasons why Limited and Magic is interesting. But you can try. I think if you try, you at least end up with a cube that supports these archetypes and kind of nudges people towards them a bit more. And then players will feel free to ignore you and diverge outside that and then end up inventing awesome new decks that you hadn't thought of and stuff. But without fully just going mono planeswalkers, for instance. So, looking at this from another direction, I think if you wanted to build a cube that had all these planeswalkers in it, and other, I'm picking on planeswalkers here, but they definitely epitomize this because they're sort of more obviously high picks, you know, than the typical very big creature. Because most very big creatures are very big, very sort of prohibitively expensive. You look at Woodfall Primus, you're like, yeah, I can't cast that. You look at Elspeth Tyrell, and you're like, it's only 5 mana. I can splash with that. You know, it's -2 makes 3 tokens. It's ridiculous, right? You know, because the card is very good. Excuse me. So, I think if you want to include all these power cards, I think maybe limiting the number of them and using them to indicate archetypes. There aren't that many planeswalkers that directly synergize with decks because they tend to have their own personalities based on their flavor, and you know, then be tweaked and balanced endlessly for their gameplay needs. So I think actually making a planeswalker that is like, so something like Daretti, right, is a counter example to this. Daretti is just play me in an artifact deck. Look at me, Dak Faden is legacy good stuff to the core, right? He's, built kind of more on a gameplay, more from a gameplay perspective, I think. So those cards, I think, are maybe more where you want to go, because they suggest things to you. They say, play me in a theme. I mean, the 5 Commander Planeswalkers are actually really good examples of this, because they're all a bit less overtly powerful than the ones that are pushed to Standard, because they don't have to grind through Heroes Downfalls all the time. So not all of them are just +1, win the game, -2, win the game even harder. Like Freyalise makes tokens, but she's 5 mana, and they're only 1/1s. Compare her to Garruk Primal Hunter, right? Who's just like, he doesn't have to ultimate to draw you cards, and his +1 makes 3/3s, and his ultimate makes even more creatures. Whereas Freyalise is more suited for a format that is slower and has bigger mana, and you can kind of feed that into cube. I think Freyalise is in my own cube. I think she's a lot fairer than 5 mana Garruk, or any of the Garruks really. I think looking for the power cards that still have a synergistic slant, and avoiding the others where you can. Put your generic good stuff at like a bit of a lower power level, or something a bit less exciting. Like, for instance, in my experience, you can do whatever you want with removal. My cube is quite low on power level, but I have some of the best removal and interaction in the game. I have Counterspell, I have Swords to Plowshares, I have Path to Exile. I even have things like Gush. I mean, Gush isn't that amazing in Limited, but I have very strong, or historically very strong cards. But because they're air quotes just removal spells or draw spells, they aren't specifically the things that you play and then your opponent loses. Now, all that said, I am having some concerns about Fact or Fiction, because the strength of cards in my cube has kind of crept up slightly over time. Not the ceiling hasn't really, but the floor has, and the synergies have gotten stronger. So Fact or Fiction is now at the point where you look at your opponent's hand and they've got 5 insane cards that you don't want them to have, and you start to cry. But that's enough to earn it a spot on the watch list, but it hasn't really broken the cube in half so far. So I think it's kind of alright. You've probably realised that I do put a very heavy emphasis on what it feels like to play against a card. I tend to lean away from cards that it isn't fun to lose to, because, well, I mean, if nothing else, I'm going to lose to them a lot, and so is everyone else who plays my cube, and I want to minimize those feel bad moments. So I think you can get away with generic good stuff cards of a high power level if they aren't massively splashy. If they just trade 1-for-1 in an efficient manner, that's great. They're like, efficient removal means that you can keep up tempo, you can still interact with the game if you're mana screwed, you can be very behind, and then you're like, I need an out, you draw your out, it's a removal spell, you blow up their creature, and you still get to play something else on the same turn, so that you don't just end up in the same situation next turn looking to top deck another, only partial out. I think actually having removal spells be cheap is really good. They play more satisfyingly. So I'm kind of okay with my removal suite being really overpowered compared to the rest of the cube. And then similarly, I have stuff like Vidillion Clique, really good card, not massively game breaking. It's not card advantage per se, unless you combine it with Spirit of the Labyrinth, which is funny. It's very strong, but it's a 3 power fly. It dies quite easily. It's good, but not in itself, oh god. Whereas something like, say, Thrun or Polykranos, which is, Thrun is unkillable, Polykranos is this like walking board wipe. Those cards, they probably wouldn't print Vendilion Clique nowadays into Standard. But we just had a Standard of Polykranos. And he was important, but not game breaking, again because everyone had all these Heroes Downfalls that were just a bit cheaper than Polykranos is, and were able to interact. But in limited formats, the opponent you can't require the opponent to just have the removal spell every single time. So I generally try and avoid creatures that are aimed at standard in my cube, because they just, you play them and oh look, blah, everything dies, unless the opponent immediately answers them. So I think there's a balance to be struck between having splashy cards that aren't actually that powerful but lead your players in interesting directions, strong role-playing cards that make the format feel high-powered, feel like Modern, feel like Legacy, feel like Vintage, but don't win the game by themselves. And then synergy to make the cube thrum, to bring it to life. The decks that do stuff. Because when you have a deck that is greater than the sum of its parts, it's uniquely satisfying and powerful. Very powerful. I mean, in my cube, one of the strongest archetypes is white-black, which just, it's an attrition aggro deck, basically, and you kind of, you sacrifice things, and you play tokens, and you play Mikaeus the Unhallowed as your top end, and your opponent just cries as you recur all your creatures and kill all of theirs, and and it's made up of fairly underwhelming looking cards, apart from the like Lingering Souls and stuff, but most of the cards in it are like, that's a bit janky, or it's it's small aggro creature, but the synergies are so strong, and the actual game plan, that of attrition and value and death recursion, is so counter to certain things that make good Magic decks. So like control decks have a massive headache with this kind of thing because it's almost immune to spot removal. There are a few utility creatures that it's good to get rid of, but when they're just recurring tokens and Gravecrawlers, you can't really do anything about it. And then they play Blood Artist, and even if you wipe the board, it's all very sad. Whereas a deck with like large creatures that can set up blockers and start to race has a much better chance. But the white-black deck can run removal for that. So it's full of all these small, efficient cards that just add up to something tremendously powerful when all the pieces interlock. And so you get this really interesting deck that feels like, I want to play a deck like this in Modern. I would love to, right? I mean, it's been a standard deck, right? The Aristocrats. Apparently it's going to be another one. There is an Aristocrats deck that people are working on in various forms coming up in standard right now. Because, this is a deck that plays Blisterpod in Siege Rhino doc format, right? There's a 1/1 that dies into a different 1/1, just because sacrificing things is so inherently strong. And so you end up with this deck that is comprised of cards that by themselves don't snap a table in half, but can just project this overwhelming game plan when you play skillfully, add it all together, and it's a really satisfying drafting experience as well. And so I think if you built a Legacy cube like that, you could still keep a surprising number of splashy cards. You might actually be able to make your Legacy staples like Delver and Young Pyromancer sing, because you can make blue-red spells for real, by depowering the Planeswalker suite, or taking away Karn and Garruk and putting in more cantrips, more bolts, things that would then be more evident. Because when you look at a pack of Magic Online Cube and it's got some mythic rares, it's got like Wormcoil Engine and stuff, and then there's your Bolt. You're like, well, Bolt's good, but I can't pass this Jace or this Wormcoil or this, I don't know, Elspeth or something. So you take that, and this just kind of repeats until you find yourself in a deck. Whereas those cards don't see very much play in Legacy or Modern, except in Tron decks. But Bolt is everywhere, right? Bolt is Bolt. It's the staplest card in, I think, both Legacy and Modern. Maybe in Legacy it's Force of Will, but Bolt's up there. Again, feel free to correct me on that. I'm no Legacy expert. Certainly in Modern, Bolt is a thing, right? You don't even need to call it by its full name. It's just Bolt. It is Bolt, capital B. But in Cube, that means very little. In my Cube, you look at that Bolt, and there might not be that much in the pack that conflicts with it. There might be a Primeval Titan or something, but Primeval Titan in Limited? Just a bomb that filters lands out your deck and helps you ramp to your next bomb. It's very good. Not Inkmoth Nexus and Kessig Wolf run good, so it's not as bad. So maybe you do take the Bolt there, right? Maybe that is your first pick, depending on your playstyle as well. If you're a person who likes red-white aggro, for instance, probably take the Bolt. And and you bolt their Birds of Paradise and you kill them before their Primeval Titan comes down. So I think you end up with a bit more of an even, I hesitate to use even playing field because it's not really what I'm going for, but you end up with like this kind of more even power level that leads to a less spiky, more rounded, that's what I'm looking for, more rounded format, where decks that do lots of small things that add up to be powerful are very strong. And just playing lots of mana fixing and 5-drops is de-emphasized because there aren't so many of them. And I think that replicates the experience of playing Modern and Legacy much more closely. Right. My throat's pretty hoarse by now, so I'm going to call it an evening. But thank you very much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got a good laugh out of me recurring Griselbrand in various amusing ways. I have to admit, that's formed some good memories. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.